السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونؤمن بالله ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. Dear brothers and sisters, we're here today in the year 2019, 14 centuries after the coming Prophet Muhammad. Inshallah, the message that has started with one person, then some of his close friends and family, then a few hundred, then a few thousands of sincere believers, has now grown to more than 1.4 billion people worldwide. The early Muslims accomplished great things even though they had huge obstacles, even though they were few in number. So we may think that when this number increases many times over, millions of times over, we should even see greater results, right? Muslims all over the world should live in prosperous countries where justice and freedom prevail. Muslim countries should be creating new technologies to make life better on earth for everyone. Isn't that right? Well, I guess I can't fool anyone with these dreams. The reality is, places where you have huge numbers of Muslims aren't really a role model in anything. Not only they're behind materially, but even spiritually as well. Muslim societies suffer from injustice, poor education, bad manners, hypocrisy, etc. So what's going on? How is it that the same Quran and Sunnah that made the early Muslims great people isn't making the Muslims of today as great and successful, materially and spiritually? I'll give you a simple diagnosis and recipe today. The recipe is in mind. It's mentioned in the Quran over and over. Some Muslim scholars have pointed out how Muslims have neglected them for centuries. There is a simple recipe that, if practiced consistently, will make a Muslim strong intellectually and spiritually, and will fix a lot of diseases we suffer from as individuals and as communities. The recipe consists of two types of worship mentioned in the following Quranic verse. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك. Those who remember Allah standing, sitting, and laying on their sides, and they contemplate on the creation of the heavens and the earth, and they say, "Oh Allah, you have not created that in vain." So what's the recipe mentioned here? It's two ingredients called Zikr, remembrance of Allah, and Fikr, which is deep contemplation. But we have to go a bit deeper into these practices to shed some more light on that. It is clear that these two practices aren't part of the 5 pillars of Islam: prayer and shahada and hajj and zakat and all that. So why am I saying that because Muslims aren't implementing them the way they should be, we have all these problems? If Muslims are doing the religious obligations, avoiding the major sins, where's the problem then? We know so many Muslims who are good people. They don't drink alcohol or commit adultery. They pray and fast in Ramadan. Why are we still in bad shape with all these good practicing Muslims? Well, it's because the early Muslims, the Sahaba, weren't Muslims. No, they were believers. And they were muhsineen. You have probably heard a hadith about a man that came to the Prophet ﷺ, a man no one knew in Medina, and asked the Prophet, "What is Islam?" The Prophet said, Al-Islam an tashhad an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah wa tuqimu as-salah wa tu'ti az-zakah wa tasumu Ramadan wa tahujja al-bayt in istata'ta ilayhi sabila. So the Prophet said the definition of Islam is to do the shahada, to perform the prayers, the zakat, the hajj, all the 5 pillars of Islam that we know of. And then the man asked him, so what is Iman? So if he's asking about Islam and then Iman, that means there's a difference. So the Prophet ﷺ said, أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر وَتُؤْمِنُ بِالْقَدَرِ خَيْرَهُ وَشَرَّهُ. So the Prophet said, Iman or faith means that you believe in Allah, His angels, His books, His messengers, the judgment day, and you believe in destiny. So here, of course, the belief, because a Muslim already believes in these things, don't they? We believe in Allah and His messengers. But since the Prophet ﷺ said that Iman is now a higher level than Islam, that means this kind of faith is different. It's not just intellectual information kind of faith. Yeah, I know, there is Allah, there is the books, there is the messengers. There's a different thing here. And then the man asked, what is ihsan? Ihsan, what's the translation of ihsan? Ihsan is perfection. So what is perfect faith? The Prophet ﷺ said, ihsan is to worship Allah as if you see Him. So that's a very high level of certitude. When the man left, the Prophet told the Sahaba that it was Jibreel alayhi salam who came to teach them their religion. What did he want to teach them by these simple questions? Well, it could be that he wanted to teach them that there are multiple levels of faith, that faith can grow and become stronger. Taking the person from Islam to Iman to Ihsan. From Islam, which is just belief, to faith, to perfection, the perfect faith. The Quran also refers to this in the verse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلُ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُم. So that the Quran, Allah is speaking to a category of Muslims. It's telling them, do not say we believe. Just say we're Muslims. But faith, true faith, hasn't really entered our hearts yet. So the Quran is clearly saying that there is a difference between Muslims and believers. So, we have to be realistic. Are we Muslims or are we believers or are we Muslimin? We have to grade ourselves. In reality, brothers and sisters, looking at the state of Muslims worldwide today, we have to conclude that the majority of them fall under the category mentioned in this verse, which is they're Muslims. They haven't yet achieved true faith or perfect faith. Faith hasn't really been established strong enough in their hearts. That's why we're lazy, we backbite, we lie, we're weak, we fight with one another, and all the symptoms that we see. The Prophet ﷺ described ihsan, the highest level of faith, as worshipping Allah as if you see Him. Another hadith describes the state of real believers. When the Prophet ﷺ asked the companion, how are you doing today? The companion said, oh, Messenger of Allah, I am indeed a true believer. The Prophet said, oh, be careful. If you say something, you have to prove it. You're saying you're a true believer, so what's the proof? So the companion said that his faith is so strong that he almost sees paradise and hell, and the people in them, and the hereafter. Other companions also saw angels, others scared the shaitan. Prophet ﷺ said that when the shaitan sees Umar ﷺ walking down one path, the shaitan walks the other path. That's how strong of a faith we have. So we're not just saying that to feel bad. The companions were disbelievers at some point. Some of them even worshipped idols. However, they grew so much from there. That means spiritual growth is possible. We just have to practice and follow the things that make our faith grow stronger. Just like our physical body, we cannot become bodybuilders overnight. We need a coach, a program, the right nutrition and exercise. If we do that, we will definitely grow healthier no matter how weak we are today. Same goes for faith. If we nourish our soul consistently, our faith will grow. Nothing prevents us from being like or at least close to the Sahaba who scared the devils away. The two practices that we need are Zikr and Fikr. So we might have heard about Zikr before, and Zikr and seeking knowledge and all that. So we have to explain a little bit deeper what these mean and how to implement them in our lives. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. So brothers and sisters, now let's talk about some practical steps and ideas to implement these two ingredients in our lives. Zikr was mentioned in the Quran 154 times as a noun and 114 times as a verb. That means it's mentioned a lot of times in the Quran. You can look up the verses. For the sake of time, we cannot mention all of them, but we could mention one example. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu dhkuru Allaha dhikran kathira wa sabbihuhu bukratan wa asila. Allah here is giving an order, just like the orders of prayers and fasting, to do zikr a lot. No other worship is mentioned in the Quran to be done a lot except for zikr. Other worships have their time, but zikr can be done anytime. That's why Islamic fiqh didn't specify how zikr should be done like prayers and fasting. It's because there are so many ways of doing zikr. Each person can find what they like and can handle. Following that verse, Allah says, هو الذي يصلي عليكم وملائكته ليخرجكم من الظلمات إلى النور. So Allah starts by saying, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا الله ذكرا كثيرا وسبحوه بكرة وأصيلا. O you who believe, do the remembrance of Allah a lot and do tasbih of Him morning and evening. So that means it's imperative. Like aqimu salata is an imperative. It's an order, and udhkurullah it's also an order. There's no difference here between doing zikr and doing salah in the way Allah is giving this order. Following this verse, Allah is saying, if you do the zikr, Allah and His angels pray on you to take you out of darkness into the light. So the connection here is that the zikr of Allah is the way to get out of darkness and into the light. So we hear of zikr all the time, but the issue that we have is that we don't do it in a consistent and systematic manner. So how can we start? So like, as you know, anything that's not done consistently, it's not going to produce effective results. For example, if we talk about exercise, if you exercise one day a week or one day every 2 weeks, it's as if you're doing nothing. Same thing, if you're doing zikr, today you're doing some zikr and then you're leaving it for a week and then you're doing another day, it's not going to really produce the results, that strength of faith that we're seeing. So that means zikr, because Allah here is mentioning it has to be done a lot, it has to be morning and day, it has to be done systematically and consistently. But also we have to be aware that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ هَذَا الدِّينُ شَدِيدٌ فَأَوْغِلُوا فِيهِ بِرِفْقٍ. How can we do the right zikr program? The Prophet said this religion is very solid, so ease into it gradually. Same thing with zikr. You don't start with like 1 hour a day because you're not going to be able to keep it up. You have to start small and build up gradually. For example, the Prophet ﷺ said, every single day I do istighfar 70 times. In another version of the hadith, I do istighfar 100 times. So that means it's sunnah mu'akkada. What sunnah mu'akkada? It's the sunnah that the Prophet has performed every single day, like the prayers that we do sometimes before the Zuhr or after the Dhuhr. So it's a sunnah mu'akkada that the Prophet ﷺ does istighfar 100 times every day. So how many Muslims do that every day as a regular daily practice? Some do, but many of us don't. So maybe you could start with that. And one trick of the shaitan when it comes to zikr is you'll start, say 100 times, for example, do yourself a program, and then the shaitan will tell you, you have to do more than that, because zikr is a good thing, so why not do something else, and something else, and something else. What happens if you do that, you'll start 1, 2, 3 days, but then you'll crash. You won't be able to continue. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, ease into it gradually. So what means is, psychology tells you that to establish a habit, you have to do it, some say 21 days, some say another number of days. But for example, you could say for 40 days, I'm going to start with doing istighfar 100 times a day for 40 days. You're not going to do anything more if you're not already having any regular zikr program. After the 40 days, once you've done it, then you build some strength, then you can add something else. And there are a lot of things mentioned in the hadith of the types of zikr that could be done. Why zikr? The Prophet ﷺ, for example, said that whenever we sin, we do anything, we say a bad word, we look at something, there is a black dot that gets established in the heart. That means the heart can keep collecting black dots. What's black dot? It's darkness. Darkness prevents the believer or the Muslim from seeing things accurately. The zikr cleanses that. Istighfar, why the Prophet ﷺ does istighfar 100 times every day, even though he's the Prophet, Allah has forgiven his sins. It's because he knows the light that it brings and the purification that it brings. So now let's address the second ingredient, which is fikr, or deep contemplation. The verse again says, الَّذِينَ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ. They do deep contemplation in the creation of the heavens and earth, and they acknowledge, oh Allah, you have not created that in vain. When they do fikr, they realize that Allah didn't create the universe in vain. They see the wisdom, the beauty of Allah's power in creation. This leads to khushu', or the presence of Allah in the heart, which make rituals like prayer more meaningful to the person. And Allah says in another verse, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءُ. Those who fear Allah are the knowledgeable ones. The Quran has so many verses pointing out how things were created, from plants to animals to humans to stars and planets. You might not think of fikr as a worship, but they consider this hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, تَفَكُّرْ سَاعَةً خَيْرٌ مِنْ عِبَادَةٍ سَنَةٍ. Deep contemplation for 1 hour is better than 1 year of worship. So imagine that. That means that your studies in college can become a type of worship that strengthens your faith with the right approach to it. Obviously, the early Muslims did a lot of tafakkur. That's why they started to study science. And the Muslim world started to see many scientists who even established new types of science. We remember these accomplishments today with pride, but we don't think why they did it and why we're so far behind scientifically. It's simply because the early Muslims knew the value of tafakkur, or deep contemplation, in the universe. All you need to do when studying science, for example, is not disconnected from Allah. Meaning all the scientists of today are actually doing tafakkur. The only problem is that they are not acknowledging the creator of this masterpiece. If we do the same, but just admit that رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ, then every minute of this study will equal 1 year of worship, according to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Imagine that in 1 hour, you can get the reward, the light, and the strength of faith accomplished in 60 years of worship. That explains why the companions' faith was so strong and so advanced. It's because they combined Zikr and Fikr. And you might think that the Prophet ﷺ didn't speak about these things. He just spoke about prayer and zakat. No, one companion, for example, mentioned that he said there wasn't one single type of birds that the Prophet has not mentioned something about it to us. That means the Prophet ﷺ, he spoke about birds, how they were created, how the universe was created. So, but we have, all that hasn't been communicated to us, because what the hadith did, the companions transmitted the things about fiqh, the things that we have to know in order to perform our religion. But the Prophet spent countless hours with the Sahaba. What did he talk about? This hadith gives us a glimpse that the Prophet ﷺ did talk about the creation of the universe. So now there is a subtle distinction between tafakkur and seeking knowledge, because you might also be familiar with other hadith, for example, seeking knowledge is an obligation on every Muslim man and every Muslim woman. طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم ومسلمة. The Prophet ﷺ said, seeking knowledge is a duty, even though today Muslims don't think of it as duty. Many Muslims are doing it literally, you can't read them and write. But knowledge is not exactly tafakkur. Knowledge is a prerequisite of tafakkur. So we have to seek knowledge, we have to study, but then how do we process this knowledge? 1 minute equals 1 year of worship. Is the tafakkur that makes you think, see Allah's work in it. Because we cannot see Allah. God is the creator of all. We cannot really see Him. How we can see Him? We can see Him in His creation. I remember I heard a story once about, in a simple village back home in Egypt, there was a very pious man, a scholar, and he had a lot of students. And they came to him and told him, our sheikh, our teacher, there's this very simple lady, she's illiterate, but she's weird. She does something really weird. She sits under a tree, and we hear her. She just looks at her fingers and say, "Oh Allah, you have given me 5 fingers. If I don't have that, how would I hold things? How would I live my life?" She looks at her body and just keeps, wondering and saying, "Oh Allah, thank you for giving me that." So he told his teachers, "You don't know. She actually is doing a very high kind of worship, which is tafakkur." So what is tafakkur? Tafakkur is the kind of thinking and contemplation that builds the presence of Allah in your heart. Why do we pray and we don't feel the presence of Allah, for example? If we do tafakkur on a consistent basis, if we really look at the universe the way science now has been teaching us, look into it, look at your body. There are many things that we take for granted, but if you really look at it, every day, for example, before you do your prayer, look at your body. What did Allah has given you? What has Allah given you? Your eyes, your ear. How many people don't have sight? How many people don't have hearing? How many people don't have what you have. So these things are not simple. Allah has given you these fingers. If you think this way, then the presence of Allah will start to build in your heart. Then when you do your prayer, it's not going to be empty prayers anymore, because a lot of Muslims complain that we don't have this feeling of presence of Allah in our hearts. So why do we need both Zikr and Fikr? They are like two wings. You cannot fly with one wing. If you only do Zikr, Zikr gives you spiritual light, spiritual growth. But if you have it without knowledge, without tafakkur, then you'll have an energy, but you don't know how to use it, what to do with it. And that's why we maybe see some Muslims who do stupid things, to do illogical things. Maybe because they have some faith, they have some power of faith in their hearts, but because they didn't develop the tafakkur quality in them, their thinking is illogical. They do things that are not really, don't make sense. And at the same time, if you do tafakkur only without zikr, it's also, you cannot fly with one wing again. Because tafakkur only will maybe give you some understanding of the universe, but it will not give you the purity to see Allah's work in it. What does zikr is, it cleanses your heart, it gives you spiritual power, but so again, you have to combine both of them. So that's a reminder for me and you that if we are a little behind today as Muslims, maybe we should start implementing these two types of worship. And they are very clearly mentioned in the Quran. Zikr is mentioned in the Quran again as an order. It's not something that you can do or you cannot do. It's exactly the same level as prayers and fasting and all the other worships that we have to do. But again, for the zikr, if you want to start with a simple program, for example, start with the things that the Quran has mentioned. The Quran said, "Istaghfirullah innahu kana ghaffara." Do istighfar. The Prophet ﷺ said, "I do istighfar every day." So you might want to start with that for 40 days. Another type of zikr that's mentioned clearly in the Quran is as-salat al-nabi. يا أيها الذين إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. So that's another type of zikr that's mentioned clearly in the Quran. And then from there, as I said, don't try to go too big. Just start slowly. One thing, do it for like 30 days, 40 days, and then increase gradually. Go to the books of Seerah and find what type of zikr the Prophet ﷺ taught us, and then gradually you start building some of that into your daily life.